This is Case Files Explained. I'm walking you through one of Arizona's most concentrated bursts of violence. 8 people dead across Phoenix in just 3 weeks. What made these killings particularly challenging for investigators wasn't the brutality. It was the apparent randomness, victims with no obvious connection to each other. Today we're examining how GPS tracking, ballistic matching, and one stolen necklace brought these cases together and led to a death sentence. In November and December of 2017, Phoenix police faced a terrifying pattern. Bodies were appearing across the valley, different neighborhoods, different circumstances. But buried in the evidence from these separate crime scenes was a thread: bullets, GPS coordinates, and items taken from the dead. When investigators finally pulled that thread, it led them to a single man. A man whose final 2 victims were his own mother and stepfather. The Phoenix metropolitan area sprawls across more than 500 square miles of the Sonoran Desert. In 2017, it was home to nearly 5 million people. That scale creates investigative challenges. Different police jurisdictions, different databases. Crimes that occur miles apart may never be connected without deliberate cross-referencing. Serial violence in such an environment can go undetected precisely because no single department sees the full picture. The killings appear isolated. What changed this calculus for Phoenix investigators was technology, specifically the increasing ability to match ballistic evidence and track movement through GPS data. These tools would prove essential in linking what initially appeared to be 8 unrelated murders scattered across the valley. The first known victims were Parker Smith, 21, and Andrew Remillard, 27. On November 27, 2017, their bodies were found shot inside a vehicle in a parking lot. At that point, investigators had no reason to believe this double homicide was anything other than an isolated incident. There were no witnesses, no immediate leads. 5 days later, on December 2nd, 31-year-old Salim Richards was walking to his girlfriend's apartment. Richards worked as a security guard. He was shot and killed. His firearm was taken from the scene. That gun, a weapon meant to protect, would become a murder weapon in subsequent killings. Investigators would later establish that bullets from Richards' stolen gun connected multiple crime scenes. The killer had armed himself with his victim's own weapon. Between December 2nd and December 17th, the killings continued. LaTorre Beckford, Christopher Cameron, Maria Villanueva, each found dead in separate locations across Phoenix. Maria Villanueva, 43 years old, was discovered in an alley. On her body, investigators found something crucial: DNA evidence that would later be matched to the killer. The DNA profile didn't match anyone in the system at that time, but it would prove essential once investigators had a suspect to compare against. Then came the final 2 victims: 56-year-old Raina Cooksey and 54-year-old Edward Nunn. They were the killer's own mother and stepfather. This marked a significant shift. For the first time, there was a clear connection between a victim and a potential suspect, the victim's own son. Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. became the prime suspect. When investigators located him, what they found on his person tied the cases together. Cooksey was wearing a necklace that belonged to Salim Richards, the security guard killed on December 2nd. He also had keys to Maria Villanueva's vehicle in his possession. Physical evidence from the victims. On the suspect. At the time of arrest, for investigators, this was the break that connected the disparate crime scenes. The stolen items told a story of their own. Killers who take trophies from victims often keep them, unable to part with physical reminders of their crimes. In Cooksey's case, wearing Richard's necklace openly suggested either profound carelessness or a belief that he wouldn't be caught. Either interpretation chilled investigators. GPS data provided another layer of evidence. Prosecutors would later present tracking information, placing Cooksey near multiple crime scenes during the relevant timeframes. Modern smartphones and vehicles constantly record location data. In criminal investigations, this digital trail can place suspects where they claim they've never been. Ballistic analysis connected the dots further. Two 9mm handguns were linked to multiple crime scenes through microscopic examination of recovered bullets. Every firearm leaves unique marks on bullets it fires. Microscopic scratches from the barrel's rifling. These marks are as distinctive as fingerprints. When bullets from different scenes show matching striations, investigators can conclude they were fired from the same weapon. This linked Cooksey's alleged murder weapon to multiple victims. The case took nearly 8 years to reach trial. On September 25, 2025, Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. Was convicted on all 8 counts of first-degree murder. The lengthy timeline between arrest and conviction reflects the complexity of prosecuting 8 separate homicides in a single trial. Each death required individual proof beyond reasonable doubt. Arizona is one of 27 states that retain the death penalty. Capital cases require separate penalty phases where juries determine whether death or life imprisonment is appropriate. The defense challenged the prosecution's forensic evidence, arguing it was unreliable. They emphasized that no eyewitnesses had placed Cooksey at any of the crime scenes. This defense strategy highlights ongoing debates in forensic science. Critics argue that ballistic matching and even DNA analysis carry uncertainties that juries may not fully appreciate. Despite these challenges, prosecutors had built a case on multiple independent evidence streams. GPS data, ballistics, DNA, physical possession of victims' belongings. The jury found this cumulative evidence persuasive. They convicted Cooksey on all 8 murder counts, accepting the prosecution's theory that one man had killed 8 people. What the prosecution could not establish with certainty was motive. Why these 8 people? Some were family. Others were apparent strangers. The connection between killer and victim remained unclear in several cases. At sentencing, victim impact statements painted pictures of lives cut short. Family members described the lasting trauma of losing loved ones to senseless violence. One family member called Cooksey a monster, a term that captures the horror felt by those who lost loved ones but perhaps oversimplifies the complexities investigators faced. On December 18, 2025, the jury returned its sentencing recommendation: death for 6 of the 8 murder counts. On the remaining 2, jurors deadlocked. A deadlocked jury in a penalty phase means jurors could not reach unanimous agreement on whether death was the appropriate punishment for those specific counts. This split verdict raises questions. Did some jurors harbor doubts about the evidence in those 2 cases, or did they object to capital punishment regardless of evidence? The Maricopa County Attorney's Office announced the death sentence, emphasizing the scope of Cooksey's crimes: 8 lives taken across Phoenix in a concentrated burst of violence. Arizona's death row currently holds over 100 inmates. The appeals process typically takes years, sometimes decades, before any execution date is set. For the families of Parker Smith, Andrew Remillard, Salim Richards, Latori Beckford, Christopher Cameron, Maria Villanueva, Rainey Cooksey, and Edward Nunn, the verdict provided a form of closure. But closure in cases like this is complicated. The victims cannot be brought back. The why, the motive behind each killing, may never be fully explained. This case illustrates how modern forensic technology has transformed homicide investigation. GPS tracking can place suspects at crime scenes with remarkable precision. Ballistic analysis connects weapons to multiple incidents, revealing patterns that might otherwise go undetected. These tools help investigators see connections across jurisdictions. Understanding these forensic methods matters for citizens as well. Jurors increasingly face technical evidence that requires careful evaluation, not blind acceptance or reflexive skepticism. The Cooksey case also underscores the psychological complexity of serial violence. When perpetrators target family members alongside strangers, conventional motives become harder to identify. Domestic violence resources exist for those in dangerous family situations. If someone you know exhibits escalating violent behavior, intervention services may help prevent tragedy. Recognizing warning signs before violence escalates remains crucial. Behavioral changes, threats, and previous violent incidents all deserve serious attention from those in a position to intervene. Supporting victims' families through the criminal justice process matters too. Victim advocacy organizations provide guidance, counseling, and practical assistance during lengthy trials. The 8-year gap between crimes and conviction reflects the burden of proof required in capital cases. Prosecutors must meet the highest evidentiary standards. This timeline also shows why forensic evidence preservation matters. DNA samples, ballistic evidence, and GPS records must be maintained for years to support eventual prosecution. As forensic science continues to advance, new techniques may emerge to strengthen or challenge future prosecutions. The field remains in constant evolution. The defense's argument that forensic evidence was unreliable did not convince this jury. But such challenges remind courts that no forensic method is infallible. The National Academy of Sciences has called for stricter standards in forensic analysis. Wrongful convictions have sometimes resulted from overconfident forensic testimony. Jurors serve as a crucial check on prosecutorial claims. When called to jury duty, taking that responsibility seriously protects both public safety and individual rights. In the Cooksey case, the combination of GPS data, ballistic matching, DNA evidence, and physical trophy possession created a web too strong for the defense to break. The stolen necklace proved particularly damning. Wearing a victim's jewelry, openly, publicly, provided physical proof that linked Cooksey directly to Salim Richards' death. Such physical connections are harder to dispute than technical evidence. A jury can understand that a dead man's necklace on the suspect's neck requires explanation. The keys to Maria Villanueva's vehicle told a similar story. How did Cooksey come to possess the car keys of a woman found dead in an alley? This case demonstrates that seemingly minor items can become powerful evidence. Investigators pay attention to everything found on a suspect because any object might connect to a victim. Cooksey's killing of his own mother and stepfather shifted the investigation. Family connections provided investigators their first solid suspect after weeks of unconnected homicides. Why he killed his own family remains publicly unexplained. The trial focused on whether he committed the crimes, not on the psychological factors that might have driven him. 8 people lost their lives in 3 weeks across Phoenix in late 2017. Parker Smith, Andrew Remillard, Salim Richards, LaTorri Beckford, Christopher Cameron, Maria Villanueva, Renee Cooksey and Edward Nunn. Killed by Renee's own son. In December 2025, a jury sentenced Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. to death for 6 of those murders. This is Case Files Explained. The evidence tells the story. We're here to walk you through it.